For 24 years, Evelyn Carter had lived like a shadow. Not the kind of shadow that follows someone by choice. The kind that is pushed into corners. The kind that learns to be quiet so the world does not notice it breathing. Every night at exactly 10 o'clock, she entered the Jiang estate through the narrow service entrance behind the main building. The door was made of steel and always felt cold under her palm, no matter the season. She used the same key she had used for more than 2 decades. The lock clicked softly like it recognized her. Inside, the servants' corridors smelled of detergent and polished wood. Her uniform was always the same dull gray. Plain. Press. Plain. It was a color that did not invite attention. It said worker. It said background. It said do not look twice. She moved quietly down the hallway to the servants' quarters. The room had no windows. 6 narrow beds stood in 2 rows, each with thin mattresses and folded blankets. The air felt heavy because it never saw sunlight. Evelyn's bed was the one closest to the wall. She sat down slowly and lifted her pant legs. Her knees ached as they did every night. She reached into her small locker and took out the elastic bandages she had been using for years. They were stretched thin and frayed at the edges. Small safety pins held parts of them together. She wrapped them carefully around her knees, pulling tight but not too tight. She had learned how to measure pressure without thinking. Across from her, Mei Lin watched. Mei Lin was Chinese-Korean and the youngest of the cleaners, though she was already 52. She had been working at the estate for 8 years. Her hair was cut short, and her eyes were sharp with concern. You should ask for new ones, Mei Lin said gently, nodding toward the bandages. Evelyn did not look up. These work fine. You've said that since I came here. And they've worked fine since you came here. Mei Lin sighed. It wouldn't hurt to ask. Evelyn tied the final knot and lowered her pant legs. Asking is not always free. The room grew quiet. The other women pretended not to listen, but they heard everything. No one pushed Evelyn. She was not loud. She was not strict. But there was something in her stillness that made people careful around her. Oh wait. A story. Thunder shook the building. Rain slammed against the estate windows, though none of it could be heard clearly in the basement quarters. The storm outside was strong. The storm inside the mansion would remain silent. Evelyn stood and checked her uniform pockets. Rack. Cleaning solution. Small cloth towel. Everything in place. She stepped back into the corridor and began the long walk toward the main house. The Jiang estate sat on 12 acres of expensive land in Busan. Tall gates guarded the entrance. Security cameras watched every angle. The gardens were trimmed perfectly even in the rain. But what made visitors uneasy was not the size. It was the silence. Inside, the floors were made of marble polished so well they reflected the crystal chandeliers above. Antique furniture lined the hallways. Paintings in heavy frames hung on the walls, passed down through 5 generations of the Jiang family. Even the air felt expensive. Evelyn walked through the industrial kitchen where the night cook prepared food that often went untouched. She passed the laundry room where uniforms were pressed with military care. Finally, she reached the heavy wooden door that separated servant spaces from master spaces. She pushed it open. The main hallway stretched before her like a cathedral. At the end of the hall, a thin line of light slipped from beneath the study door. Jiang Taehyun was home. Evelyn lowered her eyes automatically. It was not something she thought about anymore. It was habit. She began cleaning at the far end of the hallway nearest the study. That was the rule. Clean toward the boss. Never have your back turned. She knelt carefully, knees protesting, and began moving her rag in slow circles across the marble. The study door opened. Leather shoes stepped into view. Italian. Shined so well they reflected the light above. Taehyun did not look at her. He was speaking into his phone in sharp, fast Korean. What? His voice cut through the hallway. Evelyn kept cleaning. She understood more Korean than most people thought. Years of listening had taught her that much. But she had also learned to act as if she understood nothing. I don't care if he's bleeding, Taehyun said coldly. He pays by Friday or his daughter's school gets a visit. Pause. No, I haven't eaten. I'm not hungry. Tell the kitchen to stop asking. The call ended. The shoes turned slightly as if to go back into the study. Then they stopped. Evelyn's hand slowed but did not freeze. She kept her eyes down. The shoes moved closer. Stopped inches from her rag. Look at me. The words were not loud. But they carried weight. Slowly, Evelyn raised her head. Jiang Taehyun stood over her. He was 45 years old, but stress had placed lines around his mouth that made him appear older. His dark hair was neat. His face was handsome in a sharp way, like a man carved from stone. His eyes were deep and unreadable. "You've been here a long time," he said. "Yes, sir." "How long?" 24 years this October." Something shifted in his expression. "Surprise. That's longer than most of my men have been alive." "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment as if trying to place her face for the first time. He saw the gray strands in her hair, the fine lines in her dark skin, the worn knee pads beneath her uniform. "Why?" he asked. She waited. "Why stay here that long?" he clarified. "Cleaning staff don't stay more than a few years. The work is hard. The pay is average. And I'm not easy to work for." Evelyn chose her words carefully. "The work is honest," she said quietly. "And I don't have family in Korea." This became familiar. He nodded once. It was an answer that required no further questions. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and stepped back toward the study. The door closed softly behind him. The hallway returned to silence. Evelyn lowered her gaze and continued polishing the floor. The rag moved in steady circles. She did not tell him the truth. She did not tell him that she once loved his father, Jang Min-jae. She did not tell him that she had crossed an ocean for that love. She did not tell him that she had come to this estate hoping to see Min-jae one more time, only to learn he was already married. She did not tell him she stayed because walking these halls was the closest she could come to the man she lost. She did not tell him that the cold man in the study was her grandson. Instead, she polished the marble until it shone like glass. Invisible. Silent. Waiting. In 1984, Camp Daehan military base stood at the edge of two different worlds. On one side, there were American flags, PX stores, and shelves filled with cereal boxes and soda brands shipped from across the ocean. On the other side, there were Korean streets, small food stalls, narrow alleys, and a language that rolled quickly and smoothly in ways Evelyn Carter could not yet understand. Evelyn was 24 years old when she arrived in Korea. She had taken the job at the PX store because it promised good pay and adventure. She told her mother in Philadelphia that she would only stay a few years. She wanted to see the world. She wanted to save money. She wanted something bigger than the neighborhood she had grown up in. But nothing had prepared her for the loneliness. Black American women were rare on the base. In the nearby town they were even rarer. When she walked through the streets, people stared. Some children pointed openly. Some adults whispered. She could not read the signs on buildings. She could not follow conversations around her. Inside the PX, she smiled and rang up items with steady hands. Outside of work, she returned to her tiny studio apartment above a kimchi restaurant. The walls were thin. The smell of fermented cabbage drifted through the floorboards. At night, she lay on her mattress and listened to traffic below, wondering if she had made a mistake. It was on a cold evening behind the PX store that everything changed. She was taking out trash when she heard a sound from the alley. It was not loud. Just a low groan. She froze. The alley was dark except for a weak streetlight near the corner. She should have walked away. She should have minded her business. Instead, she stepped closer. A young Korean man lay slumped against a dumpster. His lip was split. Blood stained his shirt. One eye was swelling shut. 3 American soldiers stood several feet away, laughing as they walked off. Their voices faded into the night. Evelyn's heart pounded. She knelt beside the injured man. "Hey," she said softly. "Can you hear me?" His good eye opened slightly. It was dark and sharp even through pain. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured in careful English. "Not safe." She almost laughed. "Neither are you." He tried to sit up and failed. Without thinking too much, she slid her arm under his shoulder. He was taller than she was, but he leaned on her as if he had forgotten how to hold himself upright. She half walked, half carried him 2 blocks to her apartment. Her place was small. 1 room. A hot plate. A mattress on the floor. A tiny table with 2 chairs. But it was clean. She helped him sit on the mattress. Then she fetched her first aid kit. As she cleaned the cut above his eye, he winced but did not complain. "You're American," he said quietly. "Yes." "Black American," he added like he was testing the words. She raised an eyebrow. "Very observant." He gave a small, tired smile. "I haven't met many. Not many of us around." He nodded slowly. "I'm Jang Min-jae. Evelyn Carter." He repeated her name carefully like it mattered. Over the next few days she checked on him after work. His rib was bruised but not broken. His eye healed slowly. He told her he worked at the base as a liaison between Korean and American forces. He translated. He handled communication. He moved between worlds just like she did. 6 months passed without either of them planning for it. They began having dinner together most nights. Min-jae brought small gifts sometimes. Fruit, rice cakes, once a simple flower wrapped in newspaper. Evelyn cooked American food on her hot plate. Fried chicken when she could find the ingredients. Mac and cheese made with whatever cheese she could get from the PX. Collard greens were impossible to find, so she used cabbage instead. He loved everything she made. "It makes me feel warm," he said once after finishing a plate. He began teaching her Korean phrases. He laughed gently when she mispronounced words, but never in a cruel way. She repeated them until her tongue learned new shapes. On weekends she played Motown records she had brought from home. The small apartment filled with music. He tried to dance, but he had no rhythm. She teased him about it. He would spin her clumsily until they were both dizzy and laughing. For the first time since arriving in Korea, Evelyn did not feel alone. When she found out she was pregnant, fear washed over her first. She held the small paper from the clinic in shaking hands. She expected anger, or silence, or hesitation. Min-jae took her hands and smiled. "We'll figure it out," he said. He meant it. He talked about meeting his family. About finding a way to make things work. About building a future that did not fit neatly into either country but belonged to them. When their daughter was born, he held her carefully, like she was made of glass. He traced her tiny fingers and stared at her face for a long time. They named her Monica. "She has your strength," he said softly. For a few months, their small family felt complete. Then the telegram arrived. It was short, direct. His father was dying. The family business required him home immediately. Evelyn did not understand everything about his family then. She only understood that he looked torn in a way she had never seen before. "I have to go," he said at the airport, holding her hands tightly. "But I will come back. I will send for you and Monica. I promise." She wanted to believe him. She watched his plane disappear into the sky. The first letter arrived 2 weeks later. Then another. And another. He wrote about responsibilities. About pressure. About needing time. For 3 months the letters came regularly. Then they stopped. She wrote every week. No reply. She waited. She told herself mail could be delayed. She told herself he was busy. After 6 months she called the number he had given her. A man answered in Korean. She struggled through her broken phrases, asking for Min-jae. The voice turned cold. "There is no connection between this family and any American woman," the man said. "Do not call again." The line went dead. She tried once more days later. This time the message was clearer. "If you continue contacting this family, there will be consequences." The word hung in her mind long after the call ended. She never heard from Min-jae again. There were no more letters. No explanations. No goodbye. The nights grew quieter. The music stopped playing. The apartment felt smaller than before. Evelyn would sit on the mattress, holding baby Monica against her chest. She would rock gently, whispering stories about a father who had promised to return. Outside, Korea moved forward without her understanding it. Inside that small room, a young mother held her child and tried to make peace with silence. The last of Minji's letters remained folded in a small box near her bed. She read them sometimes when Monica slept. And then she would hold her daughter closer, as if that small warm body was the only thing in the world that was truly hers. The banister in the east wing had been polished so many times that the wood no longer looked like wood. It looked like dark honey trapped under glass. Evelyn Carter stood beside it with a cloth in her hand, rubbing in slow, steady strokes. Her shoulder ached, but she ignored it. Pain was not new. Pain was part of her job. Pain was something you carried quietly and kept moving with. It was late. The mansion was supposed to be calm at this hour. The staff had already slipped back into servant spaces. The lights were low. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and expensive perfume that never fully left the walls. Evelyn's mind was empty in the way it always became when she cleaned. Cleaning gave her a simple goal: make things shine, make things neat, make things perfect. The mansion demanded perfection, and Evelyn had learned to provide it. Then the first gunshot hit the silence. A sharp crack. So loud it felt like the air itself split. Evelyn froze with her cloth pressed to the banister. For a heartbeat she thought she imagined it. In 24 years at the estate, she had never heard gunfire inside these walls. The Jang family was feared. The organization behind them was powerful. People did not attack this house. But then more shots followed. Closer. Faster. And then the sound of glass shattering somewhere down the hall. Men shouted in Korean. Some voices were angry, barking orders. Other voices were terrified, breaking as they yelled. Someone screamed, A short, sharp sound that ended too quickly like a cord being cut. Evelyn's body moved before her mind could decide what to do. She should have run. The servant's exit was behind her. Safety was behind her. Instead, she turned toward the noise. Her feet carried her forward, one step then another until she reached the edge of the main hall. What she saw there stopped her breath. Bodies lay on the marble floor. Security guards. Men she had seen daily for years. Men who used to nod at her as they passed. Men who joked with each other by the kitchen door. Men who acted like the mansion was untouchable. Now they stared at nothing. Blood spread across the marble in dark, uneven pools. It looked wrong in such a beautiful place. Like a stain on a wedding dress. Smoke hung in the air. Not from fire but from flash grenades. The bright blast had left the hall hazy and sharp-smelling, like metal and burnt plastic. Evelyn covered her mouth with her sleeve and blinked through the haze. And then she saw him. Jang Taehyun stood near the center of the chaos, moving like a man made of steel. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was splattered with blood, some of it his, most of it not. His hair was slightly out of place. His face was calm but his eyes were hard and focused. In his hand he held a blade. The chandelier light above caught the metal, making it flash as he moved. 3 attackers circled him. No, 4. Evelyn counted quickly, her mind struggling to accept what her eyes were seeing. Men in dark clothes, faces half covered, moving with purpose. Taehyun fought them with brutal speed. He ducked a swing, stepped in and drove the blade forward. One man fell. Taehyun didn't pause. He spun, blocked another attack and kicked the attacker's knee inward with a crack that made Evelyn flinch. But even as he fought, Evelyn could see the truth. He was outnumbered. He was getting tired. There was blood on his forearm dripping steadily. He was slowing. Another attacker rushed him and Taehyun drove him back, but that movement left him open. Just for a second. Just long enough. Evelyn saw a gunman circling behind him. The gunman raised the weapon, aiming at Taehyun's back. Evelyn did not think. She did not plan. She did not ask permission. She moved. Her cleaning cart was only a few steps away. The cart stood where she had left it, near the wall, loaded with supplies. On the top shelf sat a heavy glass bottle of industrial floor cleaner, thick and solid. Evelyn grabbed it with both hands. For a strange moment, her mind flashed to another time, years ago, when she had been young and strong and played softball at church. The memory was brief, like a blink, but it gave her body a familiar motion. She wound her arm back. And through. The bottle flew through the air and struck the gunman in the back of the head. Glass shattered. The gunman collapsed hard, his weapon sliding across the marble with a sharp scraping sound. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Taehyun spun at the sound, saw the fallen attacker, then saw Evelyn. For the first time, their eyes met in the middle of violence. Evelyn stood frozen, her throwing arm still extended, her chest rising too fast. Taehyun's expression flickered, shock, confusion, something close to disbelief. But there was no time. Another attacker lunged at him and Taehyun turned back, blade flashing again. Evelyn's hands began to shake. The remaining attackers pressed forward. 5 men now because some were dead or dying but still too many. Taehyun was bleeding and his breathing had become heavier. One attacker landed a hard kick to Taehyun's side. Taehyun stumbled and crashed into an antique cabinet. Glassware inside shattered. A painting tilted on the wall. Taehyun tried to stand but his balance was off. They were going to kill him. Evelyn looked around. No staff. They had fled. No security. They were dead or unconscious. No help was coming. And something inside Evelyn snapped, not in anger but in refusal. A refusal that had been buried under silence for decades. She stepped forward. Her voice rose, louder than she had used it in years. "Stop," she shouted in Korean. The attackers turned toward her, startled by the sound. Evelyn stood in her dull gray uniform, knees aching, hands trembling but her eyes steady. "In the name of Jang Min-jae," she said clearly, "I command you to stop." The name cut through the hall like a blade. Everything paused. Even Taehyun, struggling to his feet, stared at her as if she had spoken a forbidden spell. The attackers hesitated. They exchanged glances. That name, Jang Min-jae, still carried weight in the underworld even years after his death. It was a name that commanded fear. A name whispered carefully. And here was an elderly black cleaner speaking it with authority. One attacker took a step closer, confused. "What did you say?" Evelyn swallowed hard. Her heart hammered so loudly she thought they might hear it. "You heard me," she said, forcing her voice not to shake. "You are attacking the son of Jang Min-jae." The attacker scoffed. You're a cleaner? Evelyn lifted her chin. The movement felt strange, like using a muscle she had not used in decades. I'm the woman he loved, she said, her words clear and sharp. The woman he wanted to marry before his father tore us apart. The attackers looked at each other again. This was not in their plan. This was not expected. Evelyn stepped forward another inch, her hands still trembling but her voice stronger now. I held him when he cried, she continued. I knew him when he was a man, not a legend. Silence. That hesitation lasted only a moment. But a moment was enough. Taehyun moved. He surged forward like a predator released from a trap. His blade found the nearest attacker's throat with terrifying speed. Blood sprayed. The man fell without a sound. Taehyun didn't stop. He turned, drove the blade into another attacker. Then another. The hall became a blur of movement and steel. The final attacker tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps before Taehyun caught him. Then silence. The smoke hung in the air. The chandelier above still glowed softly, as if the mansion was pretending nothing had happened. Taehyun stood in the middle of the carnage, chest heaving, blood dripping from his fingers. His eyes locked onto Evelyn. She hadn't moved. She was still standing in her work uniform, shaking, her face pale, her mouth slightly open as if she couldn't believe her own words. Taehyun took a step toward her. How? He gasped. How do you know my father's name? Evelyn opened her mouth. Then her phone rang. The sound was small, almost ridiculous in the middle of death. Evelyn's hands fumbled in her pocket. She looked at the screen. International number. Philadelphia. Her throat tightened. She answered on instinct. Monica, baby. Her daughter's voice came through frantic and shaky. Mama. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay? I saw a report, something about a shooting in Houndy District. I'm okay, Evelyn whispered. I'm okay, baby. Taehyun's head snapped toward the phone. His voice turned sharp. Who are you talking to? Evelyn's hand trembled. She didn't answer fast enough. Taehyun crossed the distance in 3 long strides and took the phone from her hand. Evelyn didn't fight him. She couldn't. Her body felt like it might collapse. Taehyun brought the phone to his ear. Who is this? He demanded. Pause. Then Monica's voice, confused but steady. This is Monica Carter. Who are you? Taehyun's jaw tightened. Jang Taehyun. Silence on the other end. So long that Taehyun stared at the screen as if the call had dropped. Then Monica spoke again, slower now, heavier. Jang, as in Jang Minjae? Taehyun's eyes narrowed. Yes. Another pause. When Monica's voice returned, it sounded older than before. Give the phone back to my mother. Taehyun handed it to Evelyn mechanically, his mind clearly racing. Evelyn took it with shaking hands. Baby, I can explain. No, Mama, Monica interrupted, her voice firm. He's going to explain. Evelyn's breath caught. Put me on speaker. Evelyn hesitated, then pressed the button. Monica's voice filled the blood-scented hall. Jang Taehyun, she said clearly. My name is Monica Carter. I'm 40 years old. A beat. And if what my mother just said is true. Evelyn's knees almost gave out. Monica continued, her voice steady even as it trembled at the edges. Then I'm your sister. Taehyun's face went still. His eyes widened slightly as if the words had hit him physically. For a moment, the most feared man in Busan looked like someone who had just learned the ground beneath him was not solid. Evelyn clutched the phone close, standing among broken glass and blood and smoke, and felt the world tilt. The secret she had carried for decades was no longer hidden. And Taehyun, the man who had ignored her for 24 years, stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time in his life. The hall stayed silent. Even the mansion seemed to listen. And the shock of Monica's words hung in the air like thunder that hadn't finished breaking. By the time the sun began to hint at the edge of the sky, the Jang estate looked calm again. Too calm. The smoke from the flash grenades had cleared. The broken glass had been swept away. The blood on the marble was scrubbed until the floor shone, though the air still carried a faint metallic smell that no cleaner could fully erase in one night. The bodies were gone. Evelyn did not see where they were taken. She did not ask. In this house, questions were dangerous. Men in dark suits had arrived quickly. They moved like shadows, quiet and efficient. The police came too, but not like normal police. They came, looked, nodded, and left with envelopes tucked away. No sirens. No shouting. No public report. Money had sealed mouths the way it always did here. Evelyn stood near the hallway wall, her hands wrapped around a warm mug someone had placed in her palms. She barely remembered it happening. Her whole body trembled from shock. Her knees felt weak, but she stayed standing because sitting felt like surrender. Taehyun had disappeared into the study right after the call. Not walking, storming. He had not said another word to her. His face had been hard, but his eyes were different. Confused. Wild. Like a man staring at a truth he was not ready to touch. Now, a guard appeared at the edge of the hallway and gave Evelyn a stiff nod. "He wants to see you," the guard said. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She followed him to the study door. The study had always been a closed world to her. A place of power. A place she cleaned around but never entered. Even after 24 years, she had only seen inside it when the door opened briefly. Tonight she stepped through. The room smelled of leather, whiskey, and expensive cigars. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. Heavy curtains hung over tall windows. A desk sat at the center like a throne, polished to a perfect shine. And on that desk sat a photograph. An old Polaroid, faded at the corners and creased down the middle as if it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Taehyun stood behind the desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messed, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired in a way money could not fix. His eyes were locked on the photograph. Evelyn's breath caught when she saw it clearly. Jang Minjae. Young. Smiling. Not the hard legend people whispered about, but a real man with soft eyes and a relaxed face. Beside him stood a younger Evelyn, her skin glowing, her hair full and loose, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blanket. Baby Monica. Minji's arm was around Evelyn's shoulders, his hand resting gently as if he was proud, as if he was at peace. Taehyun's voice cut through the silence. "She's lying," he said, but the words sounded weak, like he did not believe them. Evelyn said nothing. "My father," Taehyun continued, swallowing hard, "he would have told me. He would have said something." Evelyn's voice, when it came, was soft and steady. "Would he?" Taehyun's jaw tightened. He stared at her like he was trying to see through her skin. "Did he ever tell you about the year he spent away from home when he was in his 20s? Evelyn asked gently. "Did he ever mention a woman named Evelyn?" Taehyun searched his memory. He found nothing. He exhaled slowly. "He came back, different," he admitted. "My mother always said something happened to him in Busan. Something that made him harder." Evelyn nodded once, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. "Losing us made him harder," she said. "He thought we abandoned him. I thought he abandoned me. His father's men made sure neither of us knew the truth." Taehyun gripped the edge of the desk. His knuckles turned pale. "And you came here," he said. "You worked in this house for 24 years, knowing who I was." "Yes." His eyes flashed with anger. Not violent anger. Confused anger. "Babe. And you never said anything." Evelyn lowered her gaze. "I came here hoping to see him. Just once." Her throat tightened. She forced herself to continue. "By the time I arrived, he was already married," she said. "He already had you. And I thought, what good would it do? Tear apart his life? Confuse a child? I had no power. I was only a woman who had been erased." Taehyun's voice dropped. "But you stayed after he died." Evelyn looked up then. "Yes," she whispered. "Because you were here." Taehyun stared at her. The truth sat between them like a heavy object neither of them knew how to lift. "You stayed for me," he said slowly, almost like he was testing the words. Evelyn's eyes met his. "You were all I had left of him." Taehyun's face twisted slightly, as if something in him was breaking open. He turned away from her and walked to the window. For a moment he stood with his back to her, breathing hard. Then he spoke again, quieter. "My father, he wasn't a good man." Evelyn did not argue. "He was cold," Taehyun continued. "Cruel sometimes. He taught me love was weakness. He taught me family was obligation. He taught me the only person you can trust is yourself." He swallowed. "But he also taught me to fold my socks a certain way," he said, voice cracking slightly. "He made kimchi every November the exact way his mother taught him. He couldn't sleep without the radio on. Soft jazz." Taehyun turned his head halfway, eyes glistening. "I never understood where those pieces came from," he whispered. "The soft pieces. The pieces that didn't match the monster everyone said he was." Evelyn's lips trembled. "He remembered the jazz," she said softly. "We listened to it every night. He said it made him think of someone who danced." Taehyun's brows pulled together. "Sometimes," he admitted, "when he was sick, when he was drinking, he would call me by a name that wasn't mine." Evelyn's breath caught. "Mon," Taehyun said quietly. He would say it and then stop like he'd made a mistake. Evelyn's eyes filled fully now. She blinked hard, but a tear escaped anyway. Monica, she whispered. Taehyun looked down at the photograph again. The baby in Evelyn's arms. The smile on his father's face. Then Taehyun did something Evelyn did not expect. The powerful man who owned this mansion, who ordered people hurt with a single sentence, moved away from his desk. He walked toward her. And he lowered himself to the floor. He knelt in front of her, right there on the expensive rug. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Taehyun's voice was low and rough. "Grandmother," he said. The word hit her like a wave. For 24 years she had been invisible. And now he was kneeling, calling her family. "I don't know how to be a grandson," Taehyun said, his eyes fixed on hers. "I don't know how to be family to anyone." He swallowed hard. "But I want to learn," he whispered. "If you'll teach me." Evelyn stared at him, shaking. A part of her wanted to run. A part of her wanted to laugh and cry and scream all at once. Instead, she reached out slowly and touched his face with trembling fingers. The same way she had touched Minji's face in a small apartment years ago. "Baby," she whispered. Taehyun's eyes shut briefly as if the word hurt. A soft sound came from the desk. A laptop chimed. Taehyun stood, wiped his face quickly like he was ashamed of tears, and opened the computer. The screen filled with Monica's face. She looked tired. Her eyes were red like she had been crying, but her posture was straight. "Mama," Monica said softly. Evelyn leaned toward the screen. "Baby." Taehyun hovered awkwardly beside Evelyn, as if he did not know where to place himself in a family moment. Monica looked at him through the screen. "So, you're real?" Taehyun's jaw tightened. "You are too." Monica let out a breath that sounded half laugh, half sob. Taehyun cleared his throat. "I sent you information for a DNA test." Monica blinked. "You really think we need that?" Taehyun's eyes lowered. "I run an organization built on verification," he said simply. "Yes." Then, softer, almost unwillingly honest, he added, "I want to be sure. Not for legal reasons. For me." Monica's expression softened. "Fair enough." Evelyn reached up and took Taehyun's hand, holding it tightly like she was afraid he might disappear. Taehyun looked down at her hand on his. His voice was quiet. "She's been family for 24 years, he said. "I'm the one who wasn't looking." Outside the study window, the darkness finally began to loosen. The sky turned from black to deep blue. A thin line of light rose at the horizon. Sunrise. Evelyn held her grandson's hand, her daughter's face on the screen, and felt something shift in her chest. Not the mansion. Not the money. Not the power. Something real. For the first time in decades she was not invisible. And as the sun climbed slowly, the Jang estate stood silent around them, but inside the study, a family was being born again. Jang Taehyun had spent his whole life moving through places that bowed when he entered. Restaurants emptied quietly when his men walked in first. Hotel staff smiled too hard. Business partners laughed at jokes that were not funny. Even enemies watched their tone around his name. But the moment he stepped into Philadelphia Liberty Airport, none of that mattered. The airport did not care who he was. It was loud, crowded, messy, and alive. Voices overlapped in English. Wheels rolled across tile floors. Babies cried. Someone shouted into a phone. A couple argued near baggage claim. The air smelled like coffee, fast food, and winter coats damp from outside rain. Taehyun stood still for a second, feeling oddly exposed. He wore a perfectly tailored black coat, dark trousers, and polished shoes that had never touched a city sidewalk like this. 2 bodyguards stood behind him, also dressed sharply, also scanning the area with alert eyes. They looked like a moving wall in a place that didn't want walls. One of the guards leaned closer, speaking low. "You okay, sir?" Taehyun didn't look at him. "I'm in America," he said flatly. "Surrounded by Americans. About to meet a sister I didn't know existed until a few days ago." The guard nodded once, wise enough not to say more. Then Taehyun heard a woman's voice. "Jang Taehyun." He turned. Monica Carter stood a few steps away. She was 40 years old, but her face carried a youth that came from good genes and a life that had not been filled with knives, gunfire, and fear. Her skin was warm brown. Her cheekbones were high. Her hair was pulled back in a neat style that made her look both practical and strong. But it was her eyes that hit him hardest. They were the same shape as Minji's. The same intensity. The same way of looking at someone like she was seeing straight through them. For a second, Taehyun forgot how to speak. Monica's hands shook slightly at her sides, but she kept her voice steady. "You look like him," she said. The words came out of Taehyun's mouth before he could soften them. "So do you." Monica swallowed. Her throat moved like she was holding back something heavy. They stood staring at each other. Two strangers connected by blood and silence, standing under bright airport lights like the world had turned them into a question with no easy answer. Then Monica did something Taehyun was not prepared for. She walked forward and hugged him. Not a polite touch. Not a careful step back. A full American hug, arms tight around him, squeezing him like she had known him longer than 10 seconds. Taehyun's body went stiff. His hands stayed at his sides. His guards shifted behind him, tense, ready, confused by the sudden contact. Monica pressed her cheek against his shoulder and spoke quietly. "It's okay," she murmured. "This is what sisters do. You'll get used to it." Taehyun stared straight ahead, face blank, breathing shallow. After a long moment, he lifted one hand and patted her back once. It was awkward, slow, almost formal. Monica pulled away and laughed through watery eyes. "That was the worst hug I've ever received." Taehyun blinked. "We don't." "I know," Monica said, still smiling. "Mom warned me." She turned and gestured toward the exit. "Come on," she said. "She's been cooking for 2 days straight. If we don't get there soon, the neighbors are going to start charging rent." Taehyun followed her out of the airport. Outside, the cold hit his face. The sky was gray and heavy. Cars rushed past in noisy streams. Monica led them to a black SUV that looked normal enough, but the two guards getting into the back made heads turn anyway. As they drove, Taehyun watched the streets. This was not the clean, controlled beauty of Busan's richest districts. This was real city life. Brick buildings, narrow streets, people walking fast with hands in pockets, a man pushing a cart, a woman carrying groceries, kids in hoodies laughing too loud. Monica glanced at him. "You've never been here?" she said. "No," Taehyun admitted. "Mom talked about you like you were a ghost," Monica said quietly. "I didn't know what to believe." Taehyun's jaw tightened. Neither did I. They reached South Philadelphia as afternoon light began to fade. Evelyn's home was a narrow row house on a quiet street. A small front porch with potted plants. A screen door that looked old enough to have its own memories. The kind of neighborhood where curtains moved when a strange car stopped outside. As soon as Taehyun's SUV parked, people noticed. One woman standing by a trash bin paused to stare. A man on a porch leaned slightly forward. A dog barked from behind a fence. Taehyun stepped out, coat clean, posture straight, eyes scanning without trying. One guard muttered under his breath, "We should have taken a normal car." Taehyun replied, dry and blunt, "We should have stayed in Busan." Monica shot him a look. "Welcome to America," she said, "where the neighbors know everything and mind nothing at the same time." Before they could reach the steps, the front door flew open. Evelyn stood there. Not in her gray uniform. Not with her hair pulled tight. She wore an apron that read, "Kiss the cook." Her gray hair was done neatly. Her face was glowing with a smile Taehyun had never seen in 24 years of watching her clean his floors. She looked younger. Alive. "Get in here," Evelyn said, waving her hand like a commander. "Before the whole block thinks I'm being raided." Then she grabbed Taehyun's arm and pulled him inside like he was a stubborn child. The house was small but spotless. Warm. The heat hit Taehyun's face as soon as the door closed. The air smelled rich and savory, something slow-cooked, spiced, deep. It made his stomach tighten in a way he didn't expect. Family photos covered the walls. Evelyn young and bright. Evelyn holding a baby. Evelyn with a teenage girl. Evelyn at graduations and birthdays. Taehyun walked slowly, eyes scanning the frames. In none of the photos was there a Korean face. In none of the photos was there a man beside Evelyn. He stopped in front of one picture of Evelyn holding Monica as a toddler. "You never remarried?" he said quietly. Evelyn followed his gaze. Her smile softened into something more tender. "I couldn't," she admitted. "Min-jae wasn't just a man to me. He was the one." Taehyun swallowed. "But you thought he abandoned you," he said. Evelyn nodded slowly. "I did. But I knew in my heart something was wrong. Min-jae wasn't an abandoner. After a while though, you stop hoping. It's easier." From the kitchen Monica called, "Mama, he's staring at pictures like he's in a museum." Evelyn snapped back into motion. "Because he is," she said. "Now come eat." The kitchen was small and crowded with pots, bowls and trays. The stove was busy. The counters were full. The smell was stronger here, comforting and heavy. Evelyn pointed at the table. "Sit." Taehyun sat. He didn't argue. He didn't resist. It was strange. The most feared man in his world sitting quietly because an older woman told him to. Evelyn placed a bowl in front of him. "Oxtail stew," she announced proudly. Your father's favorite. Taehyun looked down. The stew was dark and thick, meat falling from the bone, steam rising. Monica brought a plate of sweet potato pie and set it on the side. And this, Monica said, is my contribution. Evelyn snorted. She thinks she invented pie. I did, Monica argued. I reinvented it. Taehyun watched them, confused by the easy sharpness between them. They argued like it was love. Like it was normal. He tasted the stew. The flavor hit him like warmth spreading inside his chest. Rich, savory, deep. It made him feel full in a way he didn't know food could. He ate slowly at first. Then faster. Evelyn kept adding more to his plate. Mom, Monica said laughing, you're going to kill him. He's too skinny, Evelyn replied. All those noodles and no real food. Taehyun looked up slightly. Korean food is real food. Monica stared at him. Kimchi is pickle. Kimchi is not pickle, Taehyun said, offended. Evelyn waved a hand. Don't start. Eat. For the first time in what felt like his entire life, Taehyun felt something unfamiliar around a table. Warmth. Not the warmth of alcohol. Not the warmth of money. The warmth of people who did not fear him. As the plates emptied, the conversation shifted. Taehyun looked at Evelyn. What happened to him? Evelyn asked softly. At the end. Taehyun's throat tightened. Liver failure, he said. The drinking. He stared at the table for a moment, remembering. The last few months he was in and out of consciousness. But sometimes he would wake up and ask for someone named Evelyn. Monica's eyes filled immediately. Evelyn's hands froze around her fork. The nurses thought he was confused, Taehyun continued quietly. I thought he was confused too. Evelyn's breath trembled. He asked for me. Taehyun nodded once. He did. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. I was real, she whispered. I was always real. Taehyun didn't pull away. After dinner the dishes were washed. The kitchen quieted. The house settled into evening. Taehyun stepped out onto the small porch with Monica. The street was calmer now. A porch light glowed across the road. Somewhere nearby, music played faintly from a car passing. Monica hugged her arms around herself, looking serious now. You're going back soon, aren't you? She asked. I have to, Taehyun said. So soon. There are things I need to handle, he replied, voice tightening. That attack wasn't random. Monica's eyes sharpened. You think someone inside helped them? I know someone inside helped them, Taehyun said. Monica's face went pale. And now, they know about us. Taehyun looked at her. Yes, he said quietly. If anyone was listening when you spoke on speaker, they heard everything. Monica swallowed hard. Fear flickered across her face. Before either of them could speak again, a crash exploded from inside the house. Glass breaking. Both of them spun toward the door at the same time. Taehyun's body moved on instinct, stepping forward fast. Monica's breath caught. They burst inside and saw Evelyn standing in the kitchen, staring at the back window. The window was shattered. A rock lay on the floor, wrapped in paper. Taehyun picked it up, unwrapped it, and read the message written in Korean. One sentence. A cold greeting. Monica's voice whispered behind him, shaking. They found us. Taehyun's face went still. The warmth of dinner vanished like a light blown out. And the house, for the first time that day, felt small in the wrong way, like a place that could be reached. Like a place that could be hurt. The broken window changed the whole house. Before that moment, Evelyn's row house had felt safe. Small, yes. Simple, yes. But safe in the way family homes are supposed to be safe. A place where the hardest thing in the air was the smell of food and old memories. Now cold wind pushed through the shattered glass, carrying in the sharp smell of the street. Tiny pieces of glass glittered on the kitchen floor like cruel little jewels. Evelyn stood frozen, one hand pressed to her chest. Monica's face was pale. Her eyes moved quickly from the window to the rock on the floor, then to the door, then back again, as if danger might walk in from any direction. Taehyun bent down, picked up the rock, and unwrapped the paper around it. His fingers were steady, but the muscles in his jaw tightened the moment he saw the writing. The note was short. Cling. Written in Korean. Tell your new sister we said hello. Taehyun read it once. Then again. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes hardened. The room felt colder, even away from the broken window. Monica swallowed. They wrote that for me. Taehyun didn't answer right away. He folded the paper slowly and slipped it into his pocket like it was evidence he would need later. Evelyn's voice came soft but sharp. How did they find us so fast? Taehyun lifted his gaze to the broken window. Because someone told them. Monica's breath caught. Someone followed us? No, Taehyun said. Worse. He turned to them. Someone in my organization heard the truth. Someone with access. Someone who could send a message across the ocean like it was nothing. Monica wrapped her arms around herself. So when I was on speaker. Taehyun's eyes stayed on hers. Yes. The word dropped heavily into the room. Monica blinked hard. Oh God, Mama, Evelyn moved immediately, stepping forward and taking Monica's hands. No, Evelyn said firmly. No, baby. Don't you carry that. You didn't do anything wrong. You were scared. You were trying to reach me. Monica's lips trembled. Tears formed, but she did not let them fall. She had Evelyn's strength in her spine, even when her fears showed in her face. Taehyun looked around the small kitchen. The warm light above the sink. The pot still drying on the counter. The half-clean table. This house was not built for war. But war had arrived anyway. He turned to his bodyguards who had stepped in behind him the moment the crash happened. Seal the house, he ordered in Korean. Now. They moved quickly. One went to check the front door locks and windows. The other stepped outside to scan the street, his hand near his waistband even though he kept his posture calm. Monica watched them with wide eyes. Are you serious? In my neighborhood? You're turning my mom's house into a fortress. Taehyun's voice was even. They already turned it into a target. Evelyn's gaze stayed on the note. She looked older suddenly, like the weight of decades returned to her shoulders. I waited 40 years for family, she murmured. And it took them 3 days to find us. Taehyun's eyes softened slightly at her words, but his voice stayed controlled. They won't touch you, he said. Monica let out a bitter breath. How can you promise that? Taehyun looked at her. Because I will not allow it. Monica stared at him like she didn't know whether to feel comfort or fear. Evelyn stepped closer to Taehyun, her cane leaning against the counter. What are you going to do? She asked. Taehyun's answer came without hesitation. I'm going back to Busan. Monica's head snapped up. Tomorrow? Tonight, Taehyun said. Monica's mouth opened in disbelief. So you're just leaving? After all this? After we finally found each other? I'm leaving, Taehyun said, voice tight, because this happened. He gestured toward the broken window. If I stay here I'm blind, he continued. I'm far from my people. Far from my network. Far from the place where the leak exists. If I stay here I cannot protect you. Monica's eyes flashed. Protect us? Or protect your pride? Taehyun's gaze sharpened. This is not pride. Monica stepped closer, anger rising with fear. Then what is it? You think your solution to everything is violence. Somebody threatens you, you threaten back. Somebody scares you, you scare them more. Is that all you know how to do? Taehyun's face stayed calm, but his voice lowered, dangerous and honest. Yes, he said simply. Monica froze as if she hadn't expected him to admit it. Taehyun looked her straight in the eyes. That's who I am. Monica's voice shook now. You're acting like that's normal. It is normal, Taehyun said. In my world. In Busan. Where I live. Monica swallowed hard. And what about our world? This house? The street? My kids? Mama's life. Taehyun's jaw clenched. He took a slow breath as if forcing himself to speak without cutting her down. You don't understand, he said. Because you didn't grow up in it. You didn't grow up with blood on marble floors. You didn't grow up with men testing you every day to see if you were weak. In my world, weakness is an invitation. Monica's eyes brimmed with tears. So what are you saying? That we're weak? That we're soft? Taehyun's voice cracked slightly, not from sadness, but from frustration at emotions he didn't know how to handle. I'm saying I'm not like you, he said. I'm not soft. I'm not good. He stepped back a half step as if he needed distance to say what came next. I am the devil of Busan, Taehyun said. The words hung in the kitchen. Monica stared at him, breathing hard. Evelyn watched him closely. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full. Taehyun's shoulders were tight. His hands were clenched at his sides. For a moment he looked like a man trapped inside his own name. Monica's voice came out sharp. So you're going to go back and do what? Kill whoever did this. Taehyun didn't flinch. Yes. Monica's face twisted. You say that so easily. Taehyun's tone stayed flat. Because it is easy. Monica shook her head, tears spilling now. That's terrifying. Evelyn stepped forward then. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, but her voice carried authority that stopped both of them. Enough. Monica wiped her cheeks quickly, embarrassed by crying in front of Taehyun. Taehyun looked at Evelyn, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in threat but in attention. He listened when she spoke. That fact alone still felt strange to Evelyn. Evelyn walked up to Taehyun until she was close enough to reach him. Then she lifted her hand and touched his face gently, the way she had in the study. "Baby," she said softly. Taehyun's jaw tightened but he didn't pull away. Evelyn's voice stayed calm but every word carried weight. "I've watched you for 24 years, she said. "I've seen you order men hurt. I've seen you walk past pain like it was nothing." Taehyun's eyes flickered. "I've seen the devil," Evelyn continued. Monica's breath hitched. Evelyn paused. "But I've also seen you leave food out for stray cats behind the estate," she said. "I've seen you visit your father's grave every week, rain or shine, and stand there like you're talking to him. I've seen you stop when a child laughed nearby." Taehyun's throat moved. His eyes went wet but he didn't wipe them. Evelyn's fingers stayed on his cheek. "The devil doesn't do those things," she said gently. "The man does." Taehyun's breathing became uneven. "And that man," Evelyn said, "is my grandson." Monica looked at them, tears streaming, her anger melting into something softer. Evelyn lowered her hand and straightened as much as her body allowed. "So here's what's going to happen," she said firmly, like she was giving instructions in a kitchen. Taehyun held still, listening. "You're going to find whoever threatened us," Evelyn said. "You're going to handle it however you need to handle it." Monica opened her mouth to protest, but Evelyn lifted a finger, silencing her. "And then," Evelyn continued, looking Taehyun directly in the eyes, "you're going to come back here." Taehyun swallowed. "You're going to learn how to be a brother," Evelyn said. "Because Monica deserves that. And so do you." Taehyun's voice came out rough. "Halmon." Evelyn tapped her cane lightly on the floor. "That's not a request. That's an order." Monica let out a shaky laugh through tears. "She's bossy." Taehyun's lips twitched slightly, almost a smile. "The bossiest." Monica stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Evelyn and Taehyun both, pulling them into a tight hold. Taehyun stiffened at first, then allowed it. Not fully relaxed but present. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the feeling like it was food. After a few seconds, Taehyun stepped back, gentle but firm. "I have to go," he said quietly. Monica's voice shook. "When?" "Now," Taehyun said. His guards moved, ready. Evelyn reached out and squeezed his hand once. "Come back," she said. Taehyun looked at her, eyes wet, voice steady. "I will," he promised. Then he turned toward the door. The cold wind still came through the broken window. The note still sat like poison in his pocket. And as he walked out of the row house into the Philadelphia night, Taehyun carried one clear truth with him. Someone had reached across an ocean to threaten his family. And he was going home to answer that threat. Taehyun landed in Busan before dawn. The city was still half asleep when his car rolled through the gates of the Jang estate. The sky was dark, the air cold, and the trees on the property moved slightly in the wind like they were whispering to each other. The mansion stood ahead, huge and quiet. From the outside it looked untouched. Perfect walls, perfect windows, perfect silence. But Taehyun knew what had happened inside those halls. He could still smell the blood in his memory. He could still hear Monica's voice in his ear, saying the words that changed everything. "They found us." His men opened the car door. Taehyun stepped out without speaking. His coat was black, his face unreadable. The guards around him moved with extra caution because everyone could feel it. Something inside him had shifted. He walked straight into the mansion. The marble floors shone. Someone had cleaned them again, of course. The house demanded beauty even after violence. Even after death. But Taehyun's eyes were colder than the marble. He didn't go to his bedroom. He didn't go to the study. He went to the security room. It was a hidden space behind a door that looked like part of the wall. Inside, screens covered one side, showing camera angles from every corner of the estate. Control panels blinked. Radios sat on a long table. Men in black uniforms stood up quickly when Taehyun entered. They bowed. He didn't return the gesture. "Where is Lee Gwangho?" Taehyun asked. No one answered immediately. That alone was an answer. Taehyun's gaze moved from face to face like a knife. "Now," he said. One guard swallowed. He's in the east hallway. He came early. He said he was waiting for you." Taehyun nodded once. "Bring him." The guard hurried out. Taehyun stood still in the security room, hands behind his back, watching the screens without really seeing them. His mind was already in motion, running through every detail. The attack at the estate. The timing. The note in Philadelphia. The words on that paper had been written in Korean, not English. That meant the threat was coming from his side, his world, his people. Someone had listened. Someone had reported it. Someone had delivered his family's location like a package. The door opened again. Lee Guangho entered. He was tall, broad, and always looked neat. His hair was trimmed perfectly. His uniform was pressed. He had served Taehyun for 7 years as head of security. 7 years of loyalty, at least that was what Taehyun had believed. Guangho stepped forward and dropped to one knee on the marble floor. His posture was respectful, but his eyes were wrong. Too still. Too empty. A man kneeling without fear. Taehyun stared down at him. "You sold me out," Taehyun said. It wasn't anger. It was fact. Like saying the sky was dark. Guangho didn't deny it. He didn't beg. He didn't even flinch. Taehyun waited a moment, letting the silence press down. Then he asked the only question left. "Why?" Guangho's mouth tightened. His voice came out low. "The Cobra offered me your position." Taehyun's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you believed him?" Guangho hesitated. "I believed you would kill him." Taehyun said nothing. Guangho continued as if he had already accepted his fate and did not care how his words landed. "After you killed him, I had no one left to sell to," he said quietly. "But the damage was already done. I already gave them your family." The words hit the room like a slap. Even the guards standing around looked uncomfortable. Some lowered their eyes. Taehyun's chest rose slowly. His breathing stayed controlled, but his jaw flexed. He imagined Evelyn's small kitchen. The broken window. Monica's pale face. Evelyn standing there in her apron like the world had finally given her something sweet, only to try to snatch it away. And the idea that it happened because someone he trusted had opened the door for danger. Something dark moved inside him. His hand twitched slightly at his side, like it wanted to reach for a weapon. This was the moment that always happened. Betrayal. Punishment. Blood. Taehyun had done it before. Many times. The rule was simple in his world. If someone threatens you, remove them. If someone betrays you, erase them. He could do it now. He could end Lee Guangho with one word. One gesture. One quick order. The guards would not hesitate. They would obey. They always obeyed. Taehyun stared at the kneeling man and felt the familiar pull of violence. Then, in the middle of that pull, another voice rose in his memory. Not Monica's. Not Minji's. Evelyn's. Soft but firm. Handle it however you need to handle it, and then come back here. And something else. Her hand on his face. Her words. The devil doesn't do those things. The man does. Taehyun's eyes tightened. He had always chosen the devil. Always. Because the devil was easier. The devil did not feel. The devil did not hesitate. But now, he had somewhere to return to. Someone waiting. A home that did not bow. A table that argued about food instead of money and fear. If he drowned himself in blood again, what would he be returning as? Taehyun took one step closer to Lee Guangho. Guangho looked up slightly as if expecting the end. Taehyun's voice dropped. "What do you want me to do with you?" he asked. It was not a trick question. Guangho blinked, confused. He swallowed. I don't understand." Taehyun's face remained calm. "No," he said. "You don't." He turned his head slightly, looking past Guangho to the guards. "Listen carefully," Taehyun said. The room went even quieter. Taehyun looked back down at Guangho. "You're fired," he said. Guangho froze. The guards didn't move. They looked uncertain. This was not the normal ending. Taehyun continued, each word measured. "Pack your things," he said. "Leave Busan today." Guangho's eyes widened. "Boss." Taehyun cut him off. "If I ever see you again," he said, voice turning colder, "I will kill you." The threat was real. It was not dramatic. It was a boundary drawn in stone. Guangho stared up at him, shocked, like his brain could not understand mercy. "Why?" Guangho whispered. Taehyun's gaze drifted for half a second, not to the guards, not to the screens, but somewhere far away, across an ocean, into a small row house with a broken window and a woman in an apron. He answered honestly. "Because I have somewhere to be," Taehyun said quietly. "And someone to become." Guangho's mouth opened, but no words came out. Taehyun stepped back. He looked at the guards again. "Escort him out," he ordered. "Make sure he leaves the city." The guards finally moved, grabbing Guangho by the arms. Guangho did not fight. He walked like a man in a dream, still stunned. As they pulled him toward the door, Guangho turned his head once. His eyes were full of something close to fear now. Not fear of death. Fear of being spared. Taehyun watched him go. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. He didn't relax until the door shut. The security room felt different after that. Not lighter. Just unfamiliar. One guard cleared his throat carefully. "Sir," he said hesitant, "should we prepare?" Taehyun cut him off with a single look. "No," Taehyun said. He turned away from the screens and walked out of the security room. He moved through the hallways of the estate like a man passing through a museum of his old life. The chandeliers. The marble. The polished silence. The house that had shaped him into something sharp and lonely. He stepped into the main hallway and stopped for a moment. The floor reflected his face faintly. He remembered Evelyn polishing these same floors for 24 years. Invisible. Quiet. Waiting. And now she was no longer waiting in this house. She was in Philadelphia, surrounded by the life she built with her own hands. A life Taehyun had only just stepped into. Taehyun walked toward his study, but he didn't go inside. Instead, he paused near the window and looked out at the dark sky beginning to turn gray. In a few hours the sun would rise again. And for the first time in his life, Taehyun realized something clearly. He could handle his world. He could rule it. He could punish it. But if he wanted to keep the new family he had found, he could not let his world swallow him whole. He reached into his pocket and touched the folded note from Philadelphia. "Tell your new sister we said hello." His jaw tightened. This was not finished. But it was also not everything. Taehyun took a slow breath and made his decision. He would return to America. Not because he was running. Because he was choosing. He turned away from the window, already thinking of the row house, of Evelyn's voice, of Monica's stubborn courage, of a table that argued about cheese like it mattered. And as the first light of morning touched the estate, Taehyun walked forward with one clear purpose in his mind. Finish what needed to be finished here. Then go back to the place where he was learning how to be human. The second time Taehyun arrived in Philadelphia, he didn't feel as lost. The city was still loud. Still crowded. Still full of people who spoke fast and moved like they had somewhere to be. But this time he knew where he was going. He wasn't coming to investigate. He wasn't coming to confirm a secret. He was coming back because someone had told him to. And because, deep down, he wanted to. The black SUV rolled into South Philadelphia again, and again the neighbors noticed. Curtains shifted. Porch lights clicked on. A man walking his dog slowed down to stare. Taehyun stepped out, straight-backed, eyes alert. Choi Sung-go, his younger bodyguard, followed behind him with a bag slung over his shoulder. Sung-go looked around at the row houses and shook his head lightly. "This place is small," he murmured in Korean. Taehyun glanced at him. "That's why it's warm." Sung-go blinked like he wasn't sure he heard correctly. Before Taehyun could knock, the front door opened. Evelyn stood there like she had been waiting behind it. She wasn't wearing her apron today. She wore a soft sweater and loose pants, comfortable clothes that made her look like she belonged in a home instead of a mansion. Her gray hair was pulled back neatly but not tight. Her face had color in it now, life. She smiled when she saw Taehyun. Not the careful smile she used at the Jang estate. A real one. "You're late," she said, pointing at him like he was a teenager who had missed curfew. Taehyun blinked. "I came as fast as I could." Evelyn stepped aside. "Come inside before the whole block starts counting your pockets." Taehyun walked in, and the warmth of the house wrapped around him immediately. The smell of food was in the air again. Something baked. Something buttery. Something sweet. Voices came from deeper inside the house. Laughter. A child's voice. Fast talking. Taehyun paused for half a second, listening. It felt strange, like walking into a place where the rules were different and no one had handed him a guide. Monica appeared from the living room with a dish towel over her shoulder. She looked tired but brighter than before. Her eyes were sharper too, like she had decided fear wouldn't be the thing that controlled her home. "You're back," she said. Taehyun nodded. "I said I would be." Monica stared at him for a moment, then stepped forward and hugged him again. It wasn't as tight as the airport hug, but it was still a hug. Taehyun stiffened out of instinct. Then he forced himself to breathe and allowed it. His hands lifted slowly and rested on her back for a second. Monica pulled away and raised her eyebrows. "That," she said, "was a slightly better hug." Taehyun's mouth twitched. "I'm improving." "Don't get cocky," Monica replied, but her voice held warmth. From the living room a teenage girl's voice shouted, "Grandma!" "Who is that?" "Is that him?" Evelyn called back, "Yes. Come greet your uncle properly." Taehyun froze. "Uncle." The word hit his ears like a foreign language even though he understood it. Monica walked past him toward the living room. "Kids, behave," she called. Taehyun followed slowly. The living room was small, filled with family things. A couch with a blanket thrown over the back. A shelf of framed photos. A TV playing quietly in the background. Board games stacked in a corner. The room looked lived in, not staged. A teenage girl sat cross-legged on the floor with playing cards spread out in front of her. She had Monica's skin tone and smile, and her eyes were bright with curiosity. Beside her, a younger boy leaned over the cards, trying to cheat without being obvious. He glanced up, saw Taehyun, and sat up straight immediately like he was facing a teacher. The teenage girl stood quickly. "So you're my uncle?" she asked. Taehyun hesitated for a breath. "Yes," he said. She stared at him then grinned. "You look like a villain in a movie." Sungo coughed quietly behind him. Taehyun looked at the girl. "Is that good or bad?" She shrugged. "Depends. Are you going to buy me sneakers?" Monica groaned. "Don't start." Evelyn slapped the air lightly with her hand. "Respect," she warned. The boy leaned forward and whispered loudly, "Do you really run a criminal empire?" Monica snapped, "No, he does not." Taehyun looked at the boy, then at Monica. He chose his words carefully. "I run a business." The boy's eyes widened like that was the coolest thing he had ever heard. The teenage girl sat back down and patted the floor. "Come play," she said. "We're playing cards." "I'm winning." Taehyun stared at the floor. He had sat in meetings with violent men. He had watched people beg for mercy. He had made decisions that changed lives. But sitting on a living room floor to play cards with a teenager felt strangely more intimidating. Evelyn nudged him gently with her cane. "Sit," she ordered. Taehyun sat. He lowered himself to the floor in his expensive coat like it was normal. The teenage girl dealt him cards without waiting for permission. At first, Taehyun thought he could keep the two worlds separate. He told himself he would visit once, maybe twice, then return fully to his work. He told himself it was temporary. But the first time he left Philadelphia after becoming uncle, the empty feeling followed him onto the plane. Not the usual emptiness he carried like a coat. A different one. Missing. He found himself thinking about Evelyn's voice, about Monica's stubborn honesty, about children laughing at his terrible card skills. He found himself remembering the family photo and the way Evelyn stared at it like it was a miracle. So he returned. And then he returned again. The flights became a pattern. Busan to Philadelphia. Philadelphia to Busan. A man moving between darkness and light, trying to keep both in his hands without letting either one fall. Taehyun stationed guards in Philadelphia permanently. Not because he wanted to turn Evelyn's home into a prison, but because he understood something Monica had not fully understood at first. Danger did not care about distance. If his enemies could reach across the ocean once, they could do it again. And Taehyun refused to gamble with the lives of the only people who had ever made him feel human. The guards rotated in shifts. They stayed respectful. They stayed quiet. They learned to blend in as much as men like them could blend in. At first, the neighbors stared. Then the neighbors got used to it. And then, slowly, the neighborhood treated the guards like part of the street, the same way people accepted the mailman, the crossing guard, and the loud dog that barked at everything. Evelyn adjusted in her own way. She would scold the guards if they tracked mud into her house. She would offer them food whether they wanted it or not. She would call them boys, even though they were grown men with weapons. And somehow, they listened to her more than they listened to Taehyun. Monica adjusted too. She didn't stop being afraid of Taehyun's world. She didn't pretend she understood it. But she stopped acting like fear was the only thing she felt. She began asking questions instead of throwing accusations. Not because she approved of crime, but because she wanted to understand her brother. There were nights when Taehyun sat at the small kitchen table while Monica washed dishes, and Evelyn folded laundry nearby. The TV would play softly in the background. The kids would talk from the living room. The house would feel ordinary. And Taehyun would sit there in silence, letting ordinary soak into his skin. Monica would sometimes glance at him and shake her head slightly, still amazed. "I can't believe you're real," she would say. Taehyun would reply with the truth. "Neither can I." He learned brotherhood in small moments. He learned it in the way Monica didn't hold back her opinions, even when she knew he could crush people with a sentence. He learned it in the way she challenged him when he went too cold. He learned it in the way she didn't flinch away from him anymore. He learned it in the way she hugged him without asking permission. Taehyun still wasn't good at hugging. He was still stiff, still awkward. But he stopped pulling away. He started returning the embrace even if it was clumsy. The children helped too. They treated him like a strange but exciting addition to their lives. They wanted stories. They wanted gifts. They wanted him to show up to school events. They wanted him to taste their snacks and pretend they were amazing. They called him uncle like it was normal, like it was something he had always been. Sometimes Taehyun would catch himself staring at them with a quiet sadness. He would wonder what kind of man he could have been if his life had begun in a house like this instead of the Jang estate. A house where love was loud. A house where anger didn't mean danger. A house where family wasn't a weapon. But he didn't let himself stay in that place too long, because regret could drown a man. And Taehyun had survived too much to drown now. Back in Busan, his work never stopped. He attended meetings in private rooms where men spoke in low voices. He handled business deals, debts, conflicts. He reminded people why his name mattered. He didn't suddenly become kind. He didn't suddenly turn into a hero. He was still dangerous, still feared, still capable of violence when necessary. But there was a difference now. His violence had a limit. Not because the world deserved mercy, but because he finally had something to lose. He had somewhere to return to. That truth changed the way he carried himself. It changed the way he spoke to his men. It changed the choices he made when he could choose between the easy path and the hard one. The easy path was always the devil. The hard path was becoming a man. Taehyun realized he had spent most of his life believing those were the only options. Either you were feared or you were weak. Either you were a devil or you were prey. But Evelyn had cracked that idea open with simple words. The devil doesn't do those things. The man does. Taehyun didn't stop being the devil of Busan. But he stopped being only that. He accepted the truth that scared him more than any enemy ever had. He could be dangerous and still love. He could be feared and still belong. He could have blood on his hands and still hold his niece's hand crossing the street. He could protect his family without destroying himself completely. He began to understand what Evelyn meant when she said she had watched him for 24 years. She had seen everything. And still she had reached for him. That kind of love didn't erase the past, but it gave the future a chance. One evening, after a long day of noise and teasing and food, Taehyun found Evelyn sitting alone on the porch. The street was quiet. The air was cool. A porch light glowed softly above them. Monica's laughter drifted from inside the house, mixed with the children's voices. Taehyun stood beside Evelyn, hands in his coat pockets. Evelyn looked up at him. "You're thinking again," she said. Taehyun exhaled. "I always think." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then think about this." She gestured toward the house behind them. "I spent years believing I had lost everything," she said softly. "I believed I had lost Minjae. I believed I had lost my future. I believed I would die with my story still locked inside my chest." Her voice trembled slightly, but she did not break. "And now," Evelyn continued, eyes shining, "I have both my children." Taehyun swallowed. Monica was inside, alive, strong, real. And Taehyun was standing here too. Evelyn's smile was small but full. "Legacy restored," she whispered as if the words were a prayer. Taehyun looked down at her. "You saved us," he said quietly. Evelyn shook her head. "No, baby. You chose to come back." Taehyun didn't argue. He didn't know how. They sat together in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of a home that felt like a miracle. Then, slowly, the darkness began to loosen. The sky at the edge of the street turned from black to deep blue. A thin line of light appeared above the rooftops. Sunrise. Evelyn watched it like she had been waiting for it her whole life. Taehyun stood beside her, feeling the cool morning air on his face. A man who had lived in darkness for so long. A man who had been a devil because he thought he had to be. Now standing in quiet light outside a small row house, hearing family inside, knowing he had somewhere to return to again and again. Dangerous. Yes. But not empty. And as the sun rose over South Philadelphia, Evelyn's home glowed softly, not because it was rich, not because it was protected by guards, but because for the first time in decades, Evelyn Carter's world held what she had always prayed for. Family. Oh. Together.